Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Reserved Investments. And every now and then, I like to read an email from somebody that I got regarding this channel, regarding their experiences with speculating or investing in the antiques and collectibles trade. And I really find this email that I just received really relevant from what's happening in the overall market for modern era Pokemon and even Magic the Gathering cards, where we have a return of the speculator frenzy that we saw during the pandemic. And in all honesty, I am skeptical over the long-term validity of a lot of modern era Pokemon products, meaning all of this stuff that is being hoarded and bidded up unnecessarily, in my opinion, on TCG Player, on eBay. I don't think the values are going to hold over a 10 to 20 year period. I just don't see younger generations that are unable to get this stuff at retail stores, thanks to the wonderful resellers, thanks to the wonderful speculators that are buying out Costco's, Target's, Walmart's supply of Pokemon products. I don't see these items continually accelerating in value over the next 10, 20 years. Now, over the short term, yes, you want to speculate in this stuff. You're one of these speculators that can go to Costco, go to Target, go to Walmart, buy this stuff on release, and you can flip it for 4 or 5 times your money. By all means, that's the exact course of action I would tell you to take if you are attempting to speculate on these items. The people that I worry about are the individuals that are paying 4 to 5 times for some of these items. I'm here to tell you that I just don't think the values are going to hold 10 to 20 years out. Maybe over the short term, maybe over the next 5 years, but I don't see people looking at products made in the year 2025 and coveting them the same way that a lot of Pokemon and Magic the Gathering collectors covet the cards that were produced in the 1990s for each of those respectful series. Now, I could be dead wrong. I don't know how the future is going to pan out. I'm just telling you, as a consultant in the antiques and collectibles trade, I always tell people to use caution in markets like this. It doesn't matter that Pokemon is an organic collectible. If you guys recall, people speculated heavily back in the mid-1990s with Power of the Force 2, Kenner, Hasbro, Star Wars action figures. They did the same thing with 1999 Episode 1 action figures. And all that stuff was hoarded en masse. And today, again, Star Wars is still a very valuable, a very popular property, but those items are pretty much worthless on the secondary market because everybody hoarded them and went nuts for them back in the day. Case in point, I was at a Toys R Us store back in 1999 for the toy launch of the Phantom Menace Episode 1 Star Wars toy line. People were hoarding this stuff by the case. It did not end well. Now, does that mean Pokemon's going to follow suit? No, but just understand the similarities are there. And when you look at Star Wars and compare it to Pokemon, both product lines have organic collectability. This is why I keep beating the drum of caution on this channel to all the Timmies, Kimmies, and Poindexters that think the Pokemon market itself exists in a vacuum. So going back to the point of this video, this email that I received was a breath of fresh air. We're going to go through it. I'm going to read it in full, and I'm going to give you my analysis. Now, I am still suffering with the effects of COVID, so it's very hard for me to get through a video without coughing or hacking up a lung. As a result, I am also going to put this full email without the individual's name, I am keeping him anonymous for obvious reasons, in the video description below if you want to read it in its entirety. Now, that said, I am going to stop partway through and give my response. And please feel free, whether you agree with my analysis or disagree with my analysis, you can chime in the comment section below. I'm a big boy. I can handle your criticism. I've already made a lot of money in the antiques and collectibles trade. It's okay if we want to get into a debate over where Pokemon or modern era Pokemon cards are going to end up 10, 20, 30 years from now. You know, I've said this before, I don't care too much about the short term because, again, that's speculating. Anybody can go to the market right now, buy Pokemon cards, and look into their crystal ball and see most likely 6 months or a year from now, Pokemon's still going to be hot. What matters is how the overall market over the long term looks back and views the Pokemon products that were created in the year 2025. Will they look back fondly and look at these products like collectors my age look at the products that were made in the late 1990s and the early 2000s from the coveted WotC era? That's the question. There's a lot more product being made and hoarded in the year 2025 than was ever made back in the early 1990s, back in the late 1990s and early 2000s. And I want to make that very clear because that's something important that we have to keep in mind as we go along here. So let's dive right into this email, and I'm going to give my response. The title of the email is Just a Fan Sharing a TCG, that stands for trading card game, for those of you unaware, investing case study and experience. So here we go. Good evening, Shawn. I hope this email finds you well. I'm an avid viewer of your YouTube channel since early 2022, and I'm a big fan of your content and advice. 2022 was the same time I began venturing into collectible investing. Your channel turned me on to sound advice in collectible investing and even a new fascination into collecting categories I was previously unaware of, mainly rare coins and currency. Yes, and those markets are currently on fire. Out of the most popular markets in the entire antiques and collectibles trade of 2024, rare coins and graded currency came in number 3, right behind modern era Pokemon cards and also right behind graded vintage toys, mainly the coveted Kenner Toys Star Wars line. So with that being said, let's continue with your email. I'm writing because I thought I would share my case study in TCG booster box investing. Between 2022 and early 2023, I invested about $3,000 in Pokemon, Magic the Gathering, and Flesh and Blood booster boxes. I drank the Rudy with Alpha Investments kool-aid in TCG investing at the time. But to justify throwing thousands in the TCG booster boxes, at the same time, I also maxed out my employer 401k and my Roth IRA, as well as contributing to a taxable brokerage account. So I'm going to stop right there and give some commentary. This person, just judging from how this email is already structured, he has a good head on his or her shoulders simply because he looked at the market, he diversified $3,000 into collectibles, the booster boxes that he bought, but he also had the money to still max out his employer 401k, contribute to a Roth IRA, and also invest through a taxable brokerage account. Notice he did not take on debt to invest in this speculative market based on the way this email is worded. Now let's continue further. I've now sold all of my Pokemon Sword and Shield booster boxes purchased in 2022. My most recent sales sold for triple for what I paid for them. I am really shocked by the fact that these boxes actually tripled in value. I took your advice by selling on the way up, meaning I began to slowly unload them this year once I could make a 75% profit after shipping and eBay fees. All in all, I've doubled my money on the Pokemon Sword and Shield boxes I invested in. Now, this is where I'm probably going to surprise some of my audience. Look, I have nothing against if you're out of debt and you're speculating in Pokemon products and you watch my channel and you hear me always say sell into the hype. I'm not telling you that you have to sell your entire holdings. I have no problem if you're sitting on like $10,000 worth of Pokemon booster boxes and the market starts to take a turn upwards and you can literally almost double your money if you only want to sell 50 or 60% of your holdings, or heaven forbid, maybe you want to sell 70% and just hold the rest to see what the market does, that's not a problem. My problem is with the Timmies, Kimmies, and Poindexters that are going all in this market, and they refuse to sell anything into the hype. And even worse, some of them continue to buy into the hype, thinking that prices are going to go up exponentially. Always remember, when you're investing in any type of these speculative assets, I don't care even if it's rare coins, high-end pieces of art, historical documents, Pokemon cards, comic books, vintage toys, whatever it is, you have to understand these items have no underlying cash flows. It's all fugazi and fairy dust at the end of the day. That's why a lot of grading companies, a lot of high-profile auction companies have to use hype and severe marketing tactics to boost a lot of these items to get them to sell for the high price points that they sell at in certain instances. If you do not understand that and you get emotionally pulled in or attached to these markets, or you attempt to justify everything you're buying as an investment or as an asset, you will most likely get slapped in the face with the stale donut. So I just want to clarify that. Back to the email. My TCG holdings look something like this. So now he's stating what his holdings currently look like. He goes on to state, Pokemon Sword and Shield boxes sold for 100% profit. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet booster boxes sitting in my closet at the TCG player price of 10% appreciation unsold. Now, obviously, if you're only making 10% in those booster boxes, after fees, after your time involvement, it would be a massive loss. It would not be worth selling at this point. So I agree, you're not doing anything with the Scarlet and Violet booster boxes that you stated are sitting in your closet at the TCG player price of only 10% price appreciation from the time you bought them. You go on to state you also have a position in Magic the Gathering, which is also sitting in your closet at present time. And it looks like the TCG player price of those items, if you sold them at that, would be a 30% price appreciation. Again, in this market, when we factor in the time value of money, the time involvement, also eBay fees, any other expenses, potential chargebacks, potential fraud and scams, a 30% markup is not worth selling these items to achieve. You may only make 5 to 10% when all is said and done. It's just not worth it, in my opinion. So I don't blame you for holding these booster boxes. Now, you also are holding, and this is where I got to caution you guys, Flesh and Blood booster boxes that you state they're also sitting in your closet. Obviously, probably keeping the Magic the Gathering booster boxes and the Pokemon booster boxes company. And you state they are 0 price appreciation since you bought them. I want to state this up front. I am not a fan of Flesh and Blood. No disrespect to Rudy. No disrespect to all the people out there that are fans of the card game. In my opinion, it is just one step above MetaZoo, and you guys see how that panned out. I was completely against back in the day when people were going nuts over, what were they, the cold foil cards. People were sending them in to be graded, and people were paying like $2,000 to $3,000 for a mass-produced collectible that just came out a few years before, where the company just limited the amount of cold foil cards in the box sets that were available, and little Timmies were sending them in to get graded, and stupid people were paying $2,000 to $3,000 a card. You are aware, for $2,000 to $3,000, you can get yourself one hell of a rare coin collection. If you would have invested that money in rare coins or pieces of high-end currency instead of stupid cards that were just printed a few years before, you have any idea what that collection would be worth today? Some of you guys took on so much unnecessary risk back during the pandemic, even before the pandemic, with the rise of MetaZoo, with the rise of Flesh and Blood. How many times do I have to say this on this channel? In my opinion, there are only 2 collectible card games investable. Those are, number 1, the big behemoth, Pokemon. Number 2, Magic the Gathering. I do not like Yu-Gi-Oh! I do not like Flesh and Blood. I hate MetaZoo. I hate pretty much every other single card game. Unless if you are worth tens of millions of dollars and really are diversified in the antiques and collectibles space, there is absolutely no reason for you to park money in Flesh and Blood and any of the other lesser-known card games, especially when you have Pokemon and Magic the Gathering dominating the market, and that isn't changing anytime soon. So I want to be clear on that. Now, this is where your email gets interesting. You state, also in 2022, you purchased shares of stock in Amazon, Google, and also an S&P 500 index fund. And your gains in that market look something like the Amazon stock that you bought is currently sitting at 124% appreciation since the year 2022. Your Google stock is sitting at 104% appreciation. And of course, my favorite, the S&P 500 index fund, which what you state here you've been dollar cost averaging into since 2021, has appreciated 26%. Now, in all honesty, I do want to caution you here. Don't get me wrong. Amazon and Google are blue chip stocks. They are also part of the S&P 500 index. I do not like people who are not fully financially established investing in individual stocks. Because luckily for you, since 2022, we've had pretty much a bull market in the stock market. And this is why your gains are so high by investing in those individual stocks. If, however, we would have experienced a recession or a downturn, you would have been better off hiding out fully in the S&P 500 index fund, because an index fund will always provide a better return depending on market conditions. And if market conditions turn south, it sometimes takes longer for individual stocks to pop back into vogue. Now, obviously, with Amazon and Google, we don't have to worry about those major companies going to zero anytime soon. I will also state that once you become a more studious investor, if you start to spot trends in the market, you can take advantage of those trends. Case in point, back during the 2007-2008 financial crisis, I noticed that real estate investment trusts and pretty much any investment in real estate was in the toilet due to the market crash. So I was able to divert a lot of money to that space. And then when the market recovered, I profited handsomely from those gains. I did the same thing during the COVID crash with gas and oil companies and other blue chip companies like Bank of America, Dow Chemical, and also Iron Mountain, because their stocks were in the proverbial toilet during the corona crash, when everybody thought simply because this interesting new virus hit us, we were all going to be stuck indoors forever and it was going to be Armageddon. And to me, that was completely ridiculous. So I parked a lot of money in like gas and oil stocks and the like, and I did very well when the market rebounded. Now, when the market rebounded, I sold those individual stocks and then took the gains and put it in index funds, because for the long term, I like to invest financially wise in index funds. I do not like having my money sit in individual stocks because there's too many independent variables that can affect the value of an individual stock and the company's profits going forward. So that is something to be mindful of. Going back to your email, I look at these numbers and think, was my investing in TCG booster boxes worth it? My answer is yes, as it provided an interesting learning experience. But I can't help but hear your advice. Just buy an S&P 500 index fund. In the back of my head, when the reality is these things take up a lot of space in my closet, cost my labor to post and ship out, and I have to pay eBay fees, etc. Hell, if I just funneled the TCG money into Amazon and Google shares, it would have performed the same as the Pokemon booster boxes and would have been much less work for me. Well, again, we really can't look at it that way because, again, that's 2020 hindsight. You know, I get into this argument a lot with a lot of the eBay thrifters crowd. A lot of the eBay thrifter crowd, when I look at their numbers, they would honestly be better off selling their time to corporate America and actually earning like $20 an hour rather than attempting to run a full-fledged eBay business. Now, I get it. There's other variables involved. If like you're married, maybe you want to stay home from the kids with the kids and you just do eBay on the side to supplement your income, then I can kind of understand that, because if you do get a job in corporate America, maybe you have childcare costs or other expenses. But overall, it always amazes me that there's a lot of people that get into the antiques and collectibles trade and they tell me that they're making all this money. And when I review their numbers, it's like equivalent to making $5 to $8 an hour. I just don't see it. And I even ask them, where is the money that you think you're making going? Because you really don't have a pot to piss in, and you sure as hell don't have a window to throw it out of. So sometimes when I look at these numbers, I'm just boggled that people will sit there and look down at working a job in corporate America, but yet they'll continue to make poverty wages just to state that they're an entrepreneur or they're in the antiques and collectibles trade. You know, guys, there's an excellent book, and I recommend this book often on this channel. It's called Killer Stuff and Tons of Money. And if you take the time to read this book, this is the story about a true high-end antique dealer that goes by a pseudonym named Kurt Avery that takes you inside the trade. And one of the things that he starts to struggle with later in the book is that he started out like going to flea markets, antique marts, and he would buy an item for $1 and he would sell it for 20. Well, if you want to break into the higher tiers of the antiques and collectibles trade, you have to get your mindset away from, well, if I can buy an item for $1 and I can make 20 on it, and I do that enough times, I'm going to be doing pretty well. Well, the problem is you're not going to then expand out into items that you could be buying for several $1,000s. And if you make 20% on a $2,000 item, that's a $400 profit like that, with just as much effort as buying a $1 item and selling it for $20. So this is why when I get in arguments with a lot of you Pokemon speculators, with a lot of you Lego resellers, with a lot of you video game dealers, I think you guys have to understand that if you're building a business in the antiques and collectibles trade, you have to learn how to scale it. You have to learn the core concept of economies of scale. You know, obviously it should come as no surprise. I don't always agree with Rudy in Alpha Investments. But the one thing that I will say, he has so much capital and money thrown at these markets, he at least understands the concept of economies of scale. If you're a Timmy and you have one case of booster boxes and that case goes up $100, congratulations, you made $100. That's really not a lot of money. If, however, you have 1,000 of those cases and each one goes up $100, now you made a significant return on your investment. And this is something that a lot of the Timmys, Kimmys, and Poindexters need to pay attention to. You know, it's just like I tell this story in other videos. I made a lot of money on Super Mario 3D All-Stars, which came out for the Nintendo Switch, and a lot of the Timmys, Kimmys, and Poindexters thought it was going to be like a limited run product. So they all rushed to the store when it came out, and they plunked down $59.99 plus tax, and they bought 1 or 2 copies. What I did, I played the long game with that. I waited until I could go into the market and I could get that game for like $39.99 on sale. And I bought the living shit out of it. And I literally waited till it was on the shelf for like 8 months. Then I started to accumulate it. Well, when that game shot up to roughly $130 per copy, that's when I started selling my copies into the market. And I'm here to tell you this. This is probably going to surprise a lot of you. I've made thousands of dollars just flipping factory sealed copies of Super Mario 3D All-Stars into the secondary market, and I have no regrets. But again, I have the mindset of an investor. I don't have the gambler's mindset or the speculator's mindset, where a lot of these guys get so emotionally attached to these items, they throw logic out the window, and because Nintendo's releasing a game and they claim it may be limited, they have to run to the store the day it comes out, buy their copies at full retail price, and keep them factory sealed for months or years at a time. To me, that sounds completely ridiculous. And that's how I play these markets. And I still like to speculate in a lot of these items. Make no mistake, I'm right there with you if you're speculating in video games, Lego sets, Pokemon products, Magic the Gathering, and the like. The difference is, though, I'm also a high-profile investor. I like going to the market, paying $5,000 for a coin, and watching the market tick up to the point where if I want to sell that coin, now I'm going to make $1,000 to $2,000 on it. Because let you in on a little secret. It takes the same effort, the same time of handling a $1 item than it does handling a $5,000 item. This is what I mean. You have to expand your horizons if you are investing in these markets. It's just like when we talk about mutual funds and index funds. A lot of people don't start investing in those assets. Excuse me, I told you I was going to cough during this video, and I just did. Because they look at it and they go, well, what's the point? If I put $1,000 in an S&P 500 index fund and it goes up 10%, great, I made a whole $100. If I have to hold that for a year or two to return a 10% profit, is it even worth it? Well, when you get to my level and you have $100,000 or $250,000 sitting in an S&P 500 index fund and it goes up 20% in 1 year, do the math. You're making a significant amount of money because you're dealing at a higher level of assets. That's the way you got to think if you want to play these markets intelligently. Let's go back to this email. I can hear the Pokemon advocate saying, I have paper hands or I didn't hold for long enough on the Sword and Shield boxes. But the reality is, all of these modern booster boxes have a real reality of becoming the equivalent of expensive toilet paper, much like mid-1990s sports cards. My modern Magic the Gathering and Flesh and Blood don't seem far behind that right now. And even though I would have been better off selling Pokemon boxes at today's prices versus earlier in the year, that is only seen in hindsight. And he's 100% correct with his analysis. Nobody knows what these markets are going to do. It's just like I tell you guys. I have people that come to me. They watch one of my videos and they get triggered. And they say, Shawn, you don't understand. I bought this limited run video game for $30. And now if I sell it, I can sell it for $100. And my response to that is, did you just buy that one game? Or do you have a shelf in your house devoted to factory sealed limited run video games? If you do, you have to take the aggregate. Because I assure you, there are games in your collection that if you would sell on eBay, after you factor in the time value of money, the opportunity cost, all your expenses, you would actually lose money on the sale price of those items. When you look at any investment, you have to take the aggregate return of the overall portfolio. Case in point, this person invested in Amazon stock, Google stock, and an S&P 500 index fund. If he has a Vanguard account and he has those three assets in it, Vanguard will automatically present to him a yearly return of the average return on that investment. So he will see his breakdown of what he made percentage-wise in those investments. It's the same thing with antique and collectible investing. You have to look at the whole, not just the parts. Everybody wants to think that they're an awesome investor because they talk about that one asset that went to the moon. But what they're not telling you is the other 10 that either didn't do anything or the other 5 that tanked in value. This is why I am so critical of a lot of people that come to me. Shawn, you don't understand. I'm making all this money in the antiques and collectibles trade. And then they go on Facebook or they go on social media and they tell people they can't afford to buy a house. Well, if you're making all this money, I don't know about you. If I'm making over $100,000 a year, I can easily afford to buy a house. So I don't know what kool-aid you're drinking here, guys. Back to the email. Excuse me. I truly think it was best to mitigate risk at my comfortable profit price and sell at the time. I did, and I rolled the profits into traditional assets. Who knows? Maybe in a decade, I'll be proven wrong, and these TCG boxes will be worth 10 times their value. And that is possible. Nobody knows the future. But I'm here to tell you, when you see a run-up in prices like we're seeing right now with Pokemon, it is best to sell some of your holdings into the hype, take the profits, and put it in real traditional financial assets and or real estate. Something with true underlying cash flows. Back to the email. But the S&P 500 will probably be at 12,000 and I'll sleep well at night at that particular point in time. And that is quite possible. The S&P 500 index will go up over the next 10 to 20 years. If you invest in it religiously, you don't cash out your holdings, you don't get scared with the market volatility, there is like a 98% chance you will make money investing in an S&P 500 index fund over the long term. All statistics show that. I write this since you get a lot of criticism from the collectibles and TCG crowd. I'm only a couple of years into TCG investing, but from my experience, the only reason you would ever do this is for the enjoyment one gets out of these items. And I've said this before. Once you factor in the opportunity cost, once you factor in the time value of money, once you factor in just taking the risk, because remember, if somebody scams you or somebody goes on eBay and they report the item not as described or not received, you are now at the mercy of eBay to back your claim so that you get paid for that transaction. There is risk in these markets. It is not as easy as a lot of the Timmys, Kimmies, and Poindexters on a lot of these hype-driven YouTube channels make it out to be. I have been buying and selling antiques and collectibles literally since the age of 12. That's when I started in the trade. I have my fair share of stupid decisions and horror stories that I could tell you verbatim that still haunt me to this day. I have been scammed out of thousands of dollars, especially early on before I really knew what I was doing. I have formed a lot of bad partnerships with people early on that nearly cost me my business and my livelihood before I was 21 years of age. I've learned from all of this. That's why I teach the core basics of collectible finance on this channel for your benefit. Don't get me wrong. I do this to put my name out there. I am a paid consultant in the trade. I do write for Antiques and Auction News. So if you do want to use my services, shameless plug, send me an email at reservedinvestments@gmail.com. If not, if you just want to watch this video, if you just want to come in the comment section and troll me, feel free to do that as well because it helps the YouTube algorithm and it helps reach other people that may have a serious interest in learning the truth about how these markets work. Back to the email. At the end of the day, I get enjoyment out of selling collectibles and having a tiny eBay shop, but it is certainly not the most efficient use of my capital. Anyways, if you've read this far, I'm honored. Just want to thank you for your awesome videos and give you the flowers that from my perspective, your advice proved sound and was so helpful to a fan of your channel. So what he's saying is he's thanking me for this. Grateful for the knowledge you share. Look forward to more videos in the future. And of course, I'm not going to state the person's name. I will recreate this email in its exact form without the person's name attached to it and put it in the video description below. Please let me know your thoughts on this because I'm here to tell you there are risks in these markets. And unfortunately, a lot of people, they enter a bull market in the collectibles trade and they automatically think they're a genius. You know, this is something that I've said early on in this channel. You know, guys, I've been working behind the scenes in these markets for a very long time before I revealed my true identity. And I didn't start a YouTube channel until I think I started this late 2019, which means I was probably right around, 42, 43 years of age. And I see some of these 20-something kids, they think they're experts because they bought into Pokemon. Pokemon went up in value exponentially with the advent of the pandemic, with the advent of Pokemon Go. And now they think they're geniuses and they should be able to give people advice on investing in Pokemon. If I was in my 20s and YouTube existed, you are aware I never would have had the ego or the narcissism to go on YouTube as a 20-something kid and state that I'm an expert in these markets. Now, I want to be very clear here. That doesn't mean that their opinion, that their perspective on these markets isn't valid. I'm just telling you guys, please take all the hype-driven content that you find out there with a grain of salt. There are serious risks in these markets. And a lot of you are getting sucked in, not understanding that if you make a mistake and it takes 10 years for you to realize that mistake, that's a lot of time. That's a lot of lost money. That's a lot of opportunity costs that you're never, ever going to get back. Remember, the average person only lives, if you're a male in the United States, your life expectancy is roughly 76 years of age. If you keep wasting decades, you're never, ever going to recover from those mistakes. Thank you for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And just maybe, I will see you in the next upcoming video here on Reserved Investments.